My family organized what I thought was a surprise birthday party for my 75th birthday, but it turned out to be an elaborate trap to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could steal my fortune. The moment I walked into that room and saw the lawyer sitting at my kitchen table instead of birthday cake, I knew my own children had betrayed me in the most devastating way possible. Before we dive into this shocking story, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from today. My name is Alina, and at 75 years old, I thought I had raised 4 loving children who cared about my well-being more than my money. I was wrong about everything. My late husband Richard and I had built a successful real estate business over 40 years of marriage, and by the time he passed away 3 years ago, we'd accumulated substantial wealth, including multiple properties, investments, and a sizable life insurance payout. After Richard's death, I'd been managing our finances perfectly well on my own, paying all my bills on time, maintaining our properties, and even continuing to grow our investment portfolio with the help of our longtime financial advisor. At 75, I was still sharp, active, and completely capable of handling my own affairs. I played bridge twice a week, volunteered at the local hospital, and maintained an active social life with friends my age. But apparently, my children saw things differently. My oldest son, Michael, who was 52 and struggling with his own financial problems after a costly divorce, had been making increasingly frequent comments about how I shouldn't be living alone in such a large house. My daughter Sarah, 48 and married to a man with expensive tastes, had been asking pointed questions about my will and estate planning. My younger son David, 45 and always the entrepreneur with failed business ventures, had been suggesting I needed help managing my complex finances. And my youngest daughter Lisa, 42 and a stay-at-home mother with 3 teenage children, had been insisting I needed to move closer to family for safety reasons. I'd brushed off their concerns as normal adult children worrying about their aging mother. I figured they were just being caring and protective, maybe a little overprotective, but that seemed natural given that I was now a widow living alone. I never imagined they were actually plotting behind my back to take control of my money and my life. The setup for what I now call the birthday kidnapping began about 2 weeks before my 75th birthday in early October. Lisa called me with what seemed like a wonderful surprise. She said the family wanted to throw me a special birthday celebration at my own house, a big family gathering to mark this milestone birthday and honor Dad's memory since this would be my first major birthday without him. "We want to make it really special, Mom," Lisa said with what I now recognize was forced enthusiasm. "We're going to handle all the planning and preparation. All you have to do is show up and enjoy being celebrated. We'll decorate the house, arrange for catering, invite all your friends from church and the bridge club. It's going to be beautiful." I was touched by their thoughtfulness and excited about the prospect of having all my children and grandchildren together for such a meaningful celebration. It had been months since we'd all been in the same place at the same time, and I was looking forward to a joyful family gathering in the home Richard and I had shared for so many years. Over the next 2 weeks, my children were unusually attentive and involved in the party planning. They came by frequently to check on preparations and ask detailed questions about my preferences for food, decorations, and guest lists. Michael spent considerable time looking through old photo albums, supposedly to create a memory display for the party. Sarah kept asking about family heirlooms and which pieces held the most sentimental value. David wanted to review my insurance policies to make sure the house was adequately covered for hosting a large gathering. At the time, I thought they were just being thorough party planners who wanted everything to be perfect for my special day. Looking back, I can see they were actually gathering information and evidence to support their planned intervention. They were documenting my daily routines, photographing valuable items in my home, and building a case for why I supposedly needed their help managing my life. The day of my birthday party started normally enough. I spent the morning at the beauty salon getting my hair done for the celebration, then came home to find my house transformed with beautiful decorations. Lisa and Sarah had outdone themselves with elegant table settings, flower arrangements, and a stunning photo display featuring pictures of Richard and me throughout our marriage. When I complimented them on the beautiful decorating job, they exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "We wanted everything to be perfect, Mom," Sarah said. "This is such an important day, and we have some special surprises planned for you." The first guests to arrive were my grandchildren, and I was delighted to see them all dressed up for Grandma's birthday party. They seemed unusually quiet and formal, but I attributed that to the special nature of the occasion. Then my children's spouses arrived, followed by what I expected would be my friends from church and the bridge club. But instead of my friends walking through the door, I saw strangers. Professional-looking people in business attire carrying briefcases and legal folders. My confusion deepened when I realized these weren't party guests at all, but rather a lawyer, a doctor I'd never met, and a social worker. "Mom, we need to talk," Michael said, guiding me to sit down at my own kitchen table where the lawyer had spread out numerous documents. "We've arranged for some professionals to join us today because we're all very concerned about your well-being and your ability to continue living independently." The room suddenly felt cold and hostile despite all the birthday decorations. I looked around at my children's faces and saw determination rather than celebration. This wasn't a birthday party. This was an ambush. The lawyer, a stern woman in her 50s named Margaret Collins, introduced herself and explained that my family had contacted her because they believed I was no longer capable of managing my own affairs. She said they'd been documenting concerning incidents and behaviors that suggested I needed assistance or supervision in handling my finances and daily living decisions. "What concerning incidents?" I asked, my voice shaking with confusion and growing anger. "I've been managing perfectly well on my own. I pay all my bills, maintain my house, handle my investments. I'm completely capable of taking care of myself." That's when my children began presenting what they called evidence of my declining mental capacity. Michael pulled out a notebook and started reading a list of supposedly concerning behaviors they'd observed during their recent visits to my house. According to his notes, I'd been confused about dates, forgetting conversations, and making poor financial decisions. Sarah added that I'd been hoarding unnecessary items and becoming paranoid about people trying to take advantage of me. She claimed I'd accused the cleaning service of stealing items that I'd simply misplaced, and that I'd been irrationally suspicious of repair workers and service providers. David presented bank statements and financial records that he claimed showed erratic spending patterns and susceptibility to scams. He pointed to various transactions as evidence that I was making poor financial decisions or being taken advantage of by unscrupulous individuals. Lisa talked about my deteriorating social connections and increasing isolation, claiming that I'd been withdrawing from friends and activities and becoming more dependent on family for emotional support and practical assistance. As I listened to their presentations, I felt like I was hearing about a completely different person. Every incident they described had a perfectly reasonable explanation that they'd either ignored or deliberately misinterpreted. The confused about dates referred to one time when I'd mixed up the date of a doctor's appointment. The forgotten conversations were actually discussions where we disagreed about something and they'd chosen to interpret my different recollection as memory loss. The poor financial decisions included my choice to donate money to charities they didn't approve of and my decision to hire a more expensive contractor for home repairs, because I valued quality workmanship. The hoarding was actually my sentimental attachment to items that had belonged to Richard, which I wasn't ready to give away just 3 years after his death. The paranoid behavior about service providers was actually appropriate caution after reading news stories about elderly people being targeted by scams and theft. I'd been careful about who I allowed into my home and watchful of workers who seemed to be paying unusual attention to valuable items, which any sensible person should do. The erratic spending patterns were actually normal expenses for maintaining a large house and pursuing my hobbies and interests. The susceptibility to scams referred to my donations to legitimate charities, which David had characterized as falling for fraudulent fundraising appeals. But the most devastating part of their intervention was realizing how long they'd been planning this and how systematically they'd been building their case against me. They'd been documenting and photographing everything during their visits, not out of love or concern, but to gather evidence for this moment when they would try to have me declared incompetent. The doctor they'd brought, a geriatrician named Dr. Harrison whom I'd never met, explained that he'd reviewed the information my family had provided and recommended a comprehensive mental health evaluation to determine my capacity to continue living independently and managing my own affairs. Based on the concerns your children have documented, Dr. Harrison said, I believe we need to conduct cognitive testing and assess your ability to make informed decisions about your finances, health care, and living situation. This is for your own protection and well-being. The social worker, a young woman named Jennifer Martinez, talked about safety planning and support systems that would need to be put in place to ensure my well-being. She had pamphlets about assisted living facilities and information about guardianship arrangements where family members could take legal control of an elderly person's decisions. As the professionals spoke, I watched my children's faces and saw satisfaction rather than concern. They weren't worried about my well-being. They were pleased that their plan was working. They'd used my own birthday party as cover for what was essentially a legal kidnapping attempt. This is absolutely outrageous, I finally said, standing up from the table with as much dignity as I could muster. You've tricked me into my own home under false pretenses, brought strangers here to question my mental capacity, and ambushed me on what should have been a celebration of my birthday. If you were truly concerned about my well-being, you would have talked to me directly instead of plotting behind my back. Michael tried to appear sympathetic. Mom, we know this is upsetting, but we're doing this because we love you. We've been worried about you for months, and we think you need more support than you're willing to admit. What you're doing isn't love, I replied. What you're doing is greed disguised as concern. You want control of my money, and you're using fake worries about my mental capacity to get it. The room fell silent at my accusation. The professionals looked uncomfortable, clearly realizing they'd been brought into a family dispute that was more about money than genuine medical concerns. My children looked shocked that I'd called out their real motivations so directly. Sarah tried to protest. Mom, this isn't about money. We just want you to be safe and well cared for. We're worried about you living alone in this big house, managing all these financial responsibilities by yourself. If you were worried about me living alone, you'd offer to visit more often or help me find companionship, I said. If you were worried about my finances, you'd offer to help me review my accounts and make sure I'm not being taken advantage of. Instead, you've brought a lawyer and a doctor I've never met to declare me incompetent. This is about taking control of my assets, not protecting my well-being. The lawyer tried to regain control of the situation. Mrs. Patterson, your family has provided detailed documentation of concerning behaviors and incidents. It would be in everyone's best interest to proceed with a proper evaluation to determine what level of support you might need. I'm not agreeing to any evaluation based on false or exaggerated claims from people who have financial motives for wanting me declared incompetent, I said firmly. If you believe I'm mentally incapable, you can petition the court and let a judge decide based on real evidence, not manufactured concerns. Dr. Harrison seemed uncomfortable with the confrontational turn the conversation had taken. Perhaps we should schedule a separate appointment where we can discuss your health and cognitive function in a less emotionally charged environment, he suggested. I have a longtime physician who monitors my health and cognitive function during regular checkups, I replied. Dr. Peterson has been my doctor for 15 years, and he's never expressed any concerns about my mental capacity. If you want a medical opinion about my well-being, you can contact him for my medical records. Jennifer Martinez tried a different approach. Mrs. Patterson, regardless of the family dynamics here, wouldn't you benefit from having some additional support with daily tasks and financial management? There are many services available that could help you maintain your independence while providing peace of mind for your family. I already have support systems in place, I said. I have a housekeeper who comes twice a week, a handyman for home repairs, a financial advisor for investment management, and a lawyer for estate planning. I have an active social life with friends and volunteer activities. I'm not isolated or helpless. What I don't need is family members trying to take control of my life based on manufactured crises. The intervention continued for nearly 2 hours, with my children and the professionals they'd brought taking turns trying to convince me that I needed their help and supervision. They presented more evidence of my supposed decline, including photographs of areas in my house they claimed showed poor housekeeping, receipts for purchases they deemed unnecessary or excessive, and notes about phone conversations where they claimed I'd seemed confused or forgetful. But I could see through every single piece of their so-called evidence. The photographs showed normal lived-in spaces in a large house that didn't require museum-level cleanliness. The receipts showed purchases of quality items and charitable donations that reflected my values and preferences, not poor judgment. The notes about phone conversations revealed their tendency to interpret any disagreement or different perspective as evidence of mental decline. What became increasingly clear as the intervention progressed was that my children had very different ideas about how I should be living my life as a widow. They thought I should downsize to a smaller, cheaper home in a retirement community. They thought I should stop donating money to charities and save every penny for potential medical expenses. They thought I should give up expensive hobbies and interests in favor of low-cost activities appropriate for elderly people. Most importantly, they thought I should transfer control of my finances to them so they could protect me from making poor decisions and ensure that their inheritances were preserved for the future. They'd convinced themselves that their financial interests and my well-being were the same thing, and that taking control of my money would benefit everyone involved. But what they refused to acknowledge was that I was living my life exactly as I chose to live it. I wanted to stay in the home I'd shared with Richard because it was full of memories and provided continuity during my grief. I wanted to continue supporting causes I believed in because charitable giving had always been important to me. I wanted to maintain my independence and make my own decisions about my money, my time, and my priorities. Their intervention wasn't about protecting me from genuine threats to my well-being. It was about forcing me to live according to their preferences and ensuring that they would inherit as much money as possible when I died. They disguised their greed as concern, but their true motivations were transparent to anyone willing to look honestly at the situation. The turning point in the intervention came when David made a critical mistake. Frustrated by my resistance to their help, he said, "Mom, you're being selfish and irresponsible. You're sitting on all this money that could be put to better use helping your children and grandchildren. Dad worked hard to build this wealth, and he wouldn't want you wasting it on frivolous expenses when your family has real needs. His words revealed the truth behind their manufactured concern. This wasn't about my well-being or safety. This was about them wanting access to my money while I was still alive instead of waiting for their inheritance. They felt entitled to my wealth and frustrated that I was spending it on things they didn't approve of instead of giving it to them. Your father worked hard to build wealth so that I could live comfortably and independently after his death, I replied. He specifically told me to enjoy our money and not worry about leaving large inheritances because he wanted me to have security and freedom. You're dishonoring his memory by trying to take away the independence he worked so hard to provide for me. The professionals began to look increasingly uncomfortable as the family dynamics became more apparent. It was clear that this wasn't a case of a confused elderly woman needing protection, but rather a family dispute about money and control disguised as a medical intervention. Dr. Harrison was the first to speak up. I think it would be appropriate for me to schedule a private appointment with Mrs. Patterson to conduct a proper cognitive assessment without the family tensions affecting the evaluation, he said. Based on our conversation today, I don't see any immediate indicators of cognitive impairment that would warrant emergency intervention. The lawyer also began to distance herself from the situation. Mrs. Patterson, you have the right to refuse any evaluation or intervention, Margaret Collins said. If your family believes you're incompetent, they would need to file a petition with the court and present evidence to a judge. Today's meeting doesn't constitute any kind of legal proceeding or determination. Jennifer Martinez gathered her pamphlets and materials. Mrs. Patterson, if you ever decide you'd like to explore support services or assistance programs, please feel free to contact our office, she said. But any decisions about your living situation and care needs should be made by you voluntarily. As the professionals prepared to leave, my children made one final attempt to pressure me into accepting their help. Sarah started crying and said she was terrified about my safety living alone. Michael insisted that they were only trying to protect me from people who might take advantage of my generosity. Lisa begged me to consider moving closer to family so they could help take care of me. But their emotional appeals rang hollow after everything that had transpired during the intervention. They'd shown their true motivations too clearly for me to believe their claims of pure concern for my well-being. They wanted control of my money, and they were willing to betray my trust and attempt to have me declared incompetent to get it. I want all of you to leave my house immediately, I said with as much authority as I could muster. You violated my trust, invaded my privacy, and attempted to manipulate me into giving up my independence. Until you're willing to respect my autonomy and treat me with the dignity I deserve, you're not welcome in my home. The aftermath of the failed intervention was devastating for our family relationships. My children left that day angry and frustrated that their plan hadn't worked. Over the following weeks, they made several attempts to convince me to reconsider their offer of help, but their approaches became increasingly manipulative and desperate. Michael threatened to contest my will if I didn't agree to let him manage my finances. Sarah spread rumors among my friends and neighbors that I was becoming confused and might be developing dementia. David tried to convince my financial advisor that I was making poor investment decisions and needed family oversight. Lisa attempted to guilt me by saying the grandchildren were worried about Grandma living alone and needed reassurance that I was being properly cared for. But their tactics only reinforced my decision to maintain strict boundaries with them. I realized that our relationship had become toxic because they valued my money more than my autonomy, and they were willing to sacrifice my dignity and independence to get what they wanted. I took several steps to protect myself from future intervention attempts. I had a comprehensive medical and cognitive evaluation performed by my longtime physician, who documented that I was completely competent to manage my own affairs. I updated my will and estate planning documents to include provisions preventing any family member from challenging my competency without multiple medical opinions from doctors of my choosing. I also established relationships with professionals who could serve as witnesses to my mental capacity if needed. My financial advisor agreed to document our regular meetings and my coherent participation in investment decisions. My lawyer created detailed records of our consultations and my clear understanding of legal documents and decisions. Most importantly, I began building a support network of friends and professionals who respected my autonomy and independence. I joined a support group for widows, became more active in my church community, and developed friendships with other women my age who were also navigating life without their spouses. The experience taught me valuable lessons about family dynamics and the intersection of money and relationships. My children had been raised with certain expectations about inheriting wealth, and they'd begun to see my continued independence as an obstacle to their financial security. They'd convinced themselves that taking control of my money was in my best interest, but their real motivation was ensuring that as much wealth as possible would eventually come to them. I also learned the importance of having legal protections in place before family conflicts arise. If I hadn't been prepared to defend my autonomy, the intervention might have succeeded in pressuring me into accepting unnecessary supervision or giving up control of my finances. Having professional relationships and documentation of my competency was crucial for maintaining my independence. The saddest part of the experience was losing the close relationships I'd thought I had with my children. I'd believed that they loved me unconditionally and wanted what was best for me, but their actions revealed that their concern for my well-being was secondary to their interest in my money. The trust that had been broken during the fake birthday party intervention has never been fully repaired. However, the experience also brought unexpected benefits. Freed from the pressure and manipulation of family members who wanted to control my life, I've been able to make decisions based purely on my own preferences and values. I've donated more money to causes I care about, traveled to places I'd always wanted to see, and pursued interests and hobbies that bring me joy. I've also developed much stronger friendships with people who respect my autonomy and appreciate my company for who I am rather than what I might leave them in my will. These relationships are based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than financial expectations, making them much more fulfilling and authentic. Today, at 78 years old, I'm still living independently in my own home, managing my own finances and making my own decisions about my time and money. I have occasional contact with my children, but our relationships remain distant and formal. They've never acknowledged that their intervention was inappropriate or apologized for the way they ambushed me on my birthday. I've learned that protecting my autonomy and independence is more important than maintaining family harmony, when that harmony requires sacrificing my dignity and self-determination. My children may never understand that their concern for my inheritance was less important than their respect for my autonomy, but I've made peace with that reality. The fake birthday party intervention was one of the most painful experiences of my life, but it also freed me from relationships that had become manipulative and transactional. I now surround myself with people who value me for who I am rather than what I have, and I make decisions based on my own judgment rather than family pressure. If you found this story compelling and want to hear more true stories about family betrayal and financial manipulation, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts about family interventions and elderly autonomy in the comments below, and let us know if you've experienced similar situations with adult children. For another shocking story about family greed, check out the video suggestion that should be appearing on your screen right now.